Today, we will be re-entering the Studio Ghibli universe and recreate some of the cozy food moments that we can find in so many of these movies. And this food is rarely ever there to just be food. One thing I love about the Miyazaki films so much is that you can go down endless rabbit holes on the different double, triple meanings that everything is layered with, even the food scenes. And so the sugar cube in Arrietty becomes a symbol of friendship and connectedness between the two main characters. The jam toast in The Boy and the Heron functions as a symbol of Mahito's mother's memory, and the simple onigiri in Spirited Away becomes a source of comfort and way for the main character Chihiro to cope with her negative emotions and let it all out. If you've never seen any of the Ghibli movies, Spirited Away is probably the one I would recommend you start with. It's a classic. Haku offers her onigiri, which are these triangle-shaped rice bites. I just love how with Japanese food, there's so much love that goes into it. It's all cute looking and bite-sized and detail-oriented. Anyway, let's make our own. First, measure out and wash some sushi rice. Transfer the rice to a small to medium pot together with some salt and the water. Now the best way to cook rice, in my opinion, if you don't have a rice cooker, is you add almost double the amount of water, bring everything up to a boil, then reduce the heat to medium-low and allow it to simmer with the lid slightly open for about 15 minutes before removing this from the heat and letting everything sit and steam with the lid on for another 15 minutes or so. You want the rice to be still slightly warm when shaping the rice bites. So at this point, we can already get started with the filling, which is not necessary. In fact, Chihiro seems to be eating plain, unfilled rice cakes, but adding a filling is just gonna make this a lot more fun and delicious. So to a separate saucepan, I'm adding some edamame. You can also use green peas instead, plus water. And I'm just spraying this up to a boil and letting it simmer for about 5 minutes. Then I'm transferring that to a plate. I tried to mash these up with a fork. That did not really work out, so I transferred everything to the food processor. So add the drained peas or beans straight to a small blender of some kind, and plant-based mayonnaise, some soy sauce, and a little bit of vinegar, which I added in a bit later upon taste testing this. Blend this up either into a mousse, or you can also leave some texture there, whatever you prefer. And then this next part is quite optional as well, but feel free to cut a sheet of nori into small strips. Set those strips aside and then grab some onigiri molds. Also make sure that you have a bowl of water ready to go. It's important to keep things wet so the rice doesn't stick anywhere. Okay, now on to assembling. First, wet the molds. And then add about 2 tablespoons of the cooked rice. And using a wet tablespoon, you're going to press the mixture down tightly and follow this up with about a tablespoon of the filling. Then another 2 tablespoons of rice will go on top, pressing onto this once again. And then you're gonna finish this off with the, lid of the mold, tightly pressing onto that as well. And then just remove the onigiri by pushing onto the other side through the little hole. And there you go. How much rice you end up needing will depend on the size of your onigiri, so you might have to adjust the ratio here slightly. And again, despite the onigiri in the movie being completely plain, I still ended up adding the nori sheet bits because they make these look 10 times cuter, and it's going to be slightly easier to eat as well. Feel free to serve these with some sesame, some vegan chili mayo maybe. Moving on to Arrietty. This movie is incredibly cozy and beautiful to look at. Like half of it feels like watching nature, ASMR ambiance. But as sweet as it seems to be at first, it really covers a lot of darker themes like sickness, death, extinction, similar to Princess Mononoke in some ways, which we'll get to in a moment. And just like Kiki's Delivery Service, this movie has tons and tons of food scenes, which is why it is getting 2 recipes. First, I wanted to take a look at these Thumbprint cookies served with what I assume is matcha. These could be peanut butter and jam flavored. In a large mixing bowl, place some softened plant-based butter, some peanut butter, and vanilla. Whip everything up using a hand mixer until light and fluffy for about a minute. Next, add all the other ingredients. Some sugar, some unsweetened applesauce, flour, cornstarch, baking powder, and salt. Mix again. Now place the cookie dough into the fridge for about an hour or two. Once you're ready to bake, have a baking sheet lined with parchment paper and also make sure that the oven is preheated to 180 degrees Celsius. Measure out half a tablespoon per cookie, roll it in your hands into a little ball, and give each ball a little bit of space, like 3 to 5 centimeters in between. Now you could, as the name suggests, just use your thumb to create a little indentation in the center, but I thought it would look a lot nicer to use the back end of a wooden spoon and create the hole with that. Yeah, it makes it look a bit more cartoonish, which is what I wanted to go for. Bake these for about 15 minutes or until lightly golden brown. And then allow these to cool completely before filling them with a bit more jam, but that is just for aesthetic reasons. Onto serving the cookies, I put together some hot matcha, which I haven't had hot matcha in so long. I usually just drink it iced. If you add a lot of vanilla, it ends up tasting kind of like white chocolate. I don't know, the green tea and the cookies work so well together. Highly, highly recommend you try these. I also really wanted to recreate the soup from this scene here.
Oh, maybe they already know where we are! Pod will have to move!
Well, shall we see how things go? Eat. Soup's getting cold.
For context, they're a family of, I would say, 10 centimeter tall people who live in a tiny home located in a larger human home. The soup seems to be a white cream soup with veggies. Start by chopping up a bunch of white mushrooms into roughly bite-sized pieces. Also cut up an onion and 1 clove of garlic. Add some olive oil to a large soup pot and bring that to medium heat. Then add the mushrooms and onion at the same time and give that a good 6 minutes or so. Next, you're gonna add the garlic, a handful of cashews, a splash of white wine, and allow this to cook for about a minute to 2 before adding the vegetable broth cube and 1 to 2 cups of the water. Allow everything to simmer over medium for a good 10 minutes, with the lid partially on top. Transfer the contents of the pot to the blender together with another cup of water. And then you're just gonna blend this up until smooth. I also ended up adding some white food coloring just because, you know, this is science and my goal is to get this to resemble what we see on the screen as closely as possible. Transfer this back to the pot, add the remaining water until you're happy with the consistency, bring everything up to a simmer, definitely taste test and adjust with salt and pepper and any other spices that you might like. Lastly, you're gonna add the veggies, and that's gonna be frozen carrots and some broccoli florets. Allow the veggies to boil and defrost for about 3 minutes, and that's pretty much it. It's not necessarily the prettiest looking soup, but it's really delicious and comforting, especially when served with some sourdough bread and maybe some tea and some sugar cubes to stay on theme. Next up is Princess Mononoke. This movie I saw for the first time just a few weeks ago, and oh my god, my jaw was on the floor for the entirety of this film. I knew it was going to be somewhat darker than the other Studio Ghibli movies I've seen, but yeah, I was still taken aback. It really does not shy away from showing violence and brutality, which at the same time makes this film, you know, a movie about war, about exploitation, about extinction, destroying the earth. So much more impactful. Like, it was made in the late 90s, and yet it somehow, sadly, feels more relevant than ever. So yeah, definitely watch this movie, but be prepared. It's intense. Side note, to me, Ashitaka looks like he's wearing a Spider-Man costume. You know, he does try to be sort of like a vigilante type person, so that would check out. Of course, cozy, cute food moments are rare in this film. There's one that I do remember, and it's when Ashitaka and Chiko are sharing a meal in the cave. They're apparently having okayo, Japanese rice porridge, which is based on water and rice. Sometimes eggs and miso are involved, and this is my not so traditional version. Here we go. To a medium saucepan, add some washed rice, plus water and salt. I'm adding a lot more water than I normally would. The goal is not for the rice to become fluffy, but instead soupy and porridge-esque. Bring this up to a quick boil, then reduce the heat to medium-low, and allow this to simmer for a good 25 to 30 minutes. Now, for some flavor, I'm adding miso paste, some nori, and then I also added this vegan egg, ? It consists of chickpea flour, non-dairy milk, black salt, vinegar. I would definitely recommend you add some toppings. I have some fresh herbs here, which is similar to what we see in the scene. And then I also had this pre-fried tofu in the fridge. Yeah, some spring onion on top would be nice. Lots you can do. Next is Castle in the Sky. This movie was on German TV constantly when I was a kid, so I've seen it a million times, it feels like.
嬉しい。お腹ペコペコだったの。あとリンゴが1個に飴玉が2つ。
Alright, so we're gonna be recreating the egg on toast, which seems quite simple, but if you're going the vegan route, there's a few different ways you could go about this. First off, the white part of the egg, I'm recreating by mixing together glutinous rice flour, salt, black salt, a plant-based cream, some soy yogurt, and white wine vinegar. Just mixing that, setting that aside. We also need a thick slice of bread, and that we're gonna toast in a non-stick skillet with some vegan butter right next to the egg. So over medium heat, I'm letting a few tablespoons of the white mixture pan fry for about a minute before adding my plant-based egg yolk. The easiest thing to do is simply just add half of an orange or yellow cherry tomato, and then you're gonna let this cook for another minute or two before serving. You might want to sprinkle some more black salt on top, but that would be version 1. However, I also kind of felt like getting into molecular cooking. Supposedly, you can use different edible chemicals to create a super realistic looking egg yolk that has a membrane and is runny on the inside. As someone who is really bad at chemistry, the odds were not in my favor to begin with. Basically, you prepare both the egg yolk mixture and a water bath the night before. So I added these roasted vegetables to a small blender together with some oat milk, water, olive oil, salt, and kalanamak. And after blending, I mixed in some of this calcium lactate powder. I was, at 11 p.m., just being the worst person. Sorry to my neighbors. For the water bath, I blended 1 liter of water with sodium alginate. Yeah, and then you refrigerate both overnight. Now it's the next day. You basically dip a spoon of the yellow mixture into the water bath, and the water bath is supposed to give it, you know, a really thin skin. This looked so promising at first, But yeah, that hope was short-lived. I might have not blended both mixtures for long enough the night before. Maybe I should have added more of the different powders. Maybe I was using the wrong ingredients to begin with, but I think that was the right stuff. Anyway, really sad. I will link the article recipe that I used for this in the description regardless. If you want to give this a try, maybe it will work out for you. Last but not least, I wanted to briefly get into The Boy and the Heron. So far, I've seen it only once when it came out in theaters. I had a great time watching it, but I also have to be honest and say that I don't think I fully understood the plot and definitely want to go in and watch it a second time. Even just knowing that the Japanese title is completely different puts this movie in such a different perspective for me. It's called How Do You Live in Japanese, as opposed to The Boy and the Bird. It's quite a mellow, gloomy film, I would say, and therefore there's not too many delicious looking food scenes in there. But there's one that I do remember, and it's when Lady Himi hands Mahito a slice of bread topped with just an excessive amount of butter and jam. To a medium to large pot, add your frozen berry of choice. I'm going with strawberry. Also add some sugar, some vanilla, some lemon zest, and lemon juice. And that is all the ingredients that we need. We're not adding any additives to turn this into gel. The fruit is going to do that on its own. After mixing everything, you're going to turn the heat to high for just a moment to bring everything up to a boil, and then reduce the heat to medium-low and allow this to simmer with the lid partially on top for around 30 minutes, stirring frequently. Now in the meantime, we're going to deep clean our jam jar. Place the jar in a separate pot together with some water. Make sure the jar is heat proof. Bring the water up to a boil and let this simmer for about 5 minutes, and then carefully remove the jar and set it aside and allow it to dry on a clean dish towel. In the meantime, you can just briefly dip the lid of the jar into the water as well. You don't want to boil the metal of the lid here, but giving it just a few seconds in the hot water does the trick. Anyway, back to the jam. This is roughly what it should look like. Pretty gelatinous, I would say. Blending the jam is optional, but I definitely prefer it over having chunks in there. The jam jar ratio was not very well calculated on my end. Cut off some bread of choice and spread it with an enormous amount of vegan butter. I added a lot of butter, I would say, but nearly not enough to come close to what was happening in the movie. But yeah, it was enough for me. I haven't had such a simple bread, butter, and jam breakfast in a minute. I feel like that's a very German thing. I'm not sure. Is this a classic German breakfast? I would say so, but other countries could have the same. Let me know. By the way, if you would like a Ghibli themed bread recipe, I baked some bread for Kiki's delivery service the last time that I did this, so the link to that video will be down below. Thank you so much for watching this until the very end. I appreciate you so much. If I could, I would make these types of videos all the time, but since they are kind of niche, you know, it's always a gamble when it comes to performance and the algorithm and all of that, which it sucks that matters to some extent when you make YouTube videos. Yeah, but it does. So if you want to see more videos like this, click thumbs up, maybe share it with a friend. That would be super helpful. Also, I would love to know who is still watching, who actually made it to the very end. If that is you, leave a comment down below and just type in the last movie that you've seen. For me, that's gonna be Dune 2. Ooh, Anatomy of a Fall I watched recently as well. 5 stars. So much fun. Well, I don't know if fun is the right word to describe this film, but that movie lived in my head for a good week straight. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Bye!